This lesson is on multiplying and dividing radicals. When we're multiplying radicals, I can multiply the numbers under the radical together. So here, radical 6 times radical 6, I can combine them to just make it radical 6 times 6, which is radical 36, which is equal to 6. When you're multiplying the same number with the radicals just cancel out and you're just left with the singular number, which is 6. Now when I'm dividing radicals, I can never have a radical in the denominator. So to get rid of that radical in the denominator, since it's radical 2, I'm going to multiply the denominator by radical 2. And to keep it the same, I'm going to also multiply the numerator by radical 2. So in the numerator, I have radical 3 times radical 2, that's radical 6. And the denominator, I have radical 2 times radical 2, which is radical 4. Now I simplify. Radical 6 cannot be simplified or split up into perfect squares, but radical 4 is 2. So I'm left with radical 6 over 2. Simplify the expression. Negative 4 radical 15 times negative radical 3. There's an imaginary 1 here with the negative in front of this radical. So I'm going to start by multiplying the numbers in front of the radicals. Negative 4 times negative 1 is 4. And now I multiply inside the radicals. 15 times 3 is 45. Now I can simplify this and split 45 up into 9 times 5. So that turns into 4. Radical 9 is 3, so 4 times 3 is 12. Radical 5. To simplify this expression, I have a term outside a set of parentheses, so I'm going to distribute and multiply it. So when I distribute negative 3, radical 3 times 2, I'm going to multiply the negative 3 and the 2 to get negative 6. And then there's no other radical, so it's just going to stay as radical 3. Now I have an imaginary 1 here, so I'm going to multiply the numbers first. Negative 3 times a positive 1 is negative 3. And then radical 3 times radical 6 is radical 18. Now to simplify, I can't simplify this first term, but radical 18 can be split up into 9 times 2. The negative 6 radical 3 comes down. Now this 3 times radical 9 times 2. Radical 9 is 3, so 3 times 3 is 9. And the radical 2 is going to stay. Simplify this expression. I notice here again, I have a radical in my denominator. I cannot have that, so I'm going to multiply the numerator and the denominator by radical 5. Radical 4 times radical 5 is radical 20. And then I'm left with 5, because this is 5 times 1. And radical 5 times radical 5 is radical 25. Radical 20 I can split up into 4 times 5. And then I have 5 times radical 25, which is 5. Radical 4 times 5 can simplify into 2 radical 5 over 5 times 5, which is 25. Two radical 12 times 2 radical 3. So I'm going to multiply the outside numbers first. 2 times 2 is 4. Now multiply my radicals. Radical 12 times radical 3 is radical 36. Now to simplify this, radical 36 is 6. So I'm just left with 4 times 6, which is 24. So even though I started out with 2 radicals, when I simplified it, I was able to get rid of my radicals altogether. And the last problem, 6 radical 6 over radical 4. I cannot have this radical in the denominator, but instead of multiplying, I realize radical 4 is just 2. So if I take the radical, I can get rid of that in the denominator. And then radical 6, I cannot simplify, so I'm left with 6 radical 6. But now I'm still going to simplify this fraction. So 6 over 2 is 3. So I'm just left with 3 radical 6.